Thank you. I think I have a few more slides than Sandra had, so it might even look like a bit more of a academic presentation, which I'm not, but I'm really fun that I find myself back here at the university conference, because I'm a political scientist by training and have been working in the management of Consumentenbond, the Dutch consumer organization, and the director of the Nature and Environment Foundation in the Netherlands. And you probably are all a bit curious how I and how mindfulness, which is a hype word in society nowadays and in public affairs, ended up here. And I will try to explain to you how that worked. I wrote, I think 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been here talking about mindfulness and leadership and organizations. That was the moment I left the Dutch Consumers Organization and started to be a management consultant with my own practice. And then in that period, I really felt tired. I had the idea and the energy to start my own business, but I couldn't get off the couch. I was just laying down for the 4 or 5 months, just a little bit reading, but not much. Although I was in a very good physical condition training for a marathon, my mind was really not up to it. And so I was wondering what is happening to me, because I'm an energetic guy and I can do a lot. And then I came across mindfulness, and I followed a mindfulness course, and it started to become clearer to me that I was really mentally tired. And that is something that happens a lot in organizations these days, because there are so many demands that we have to deal with when working in an organization, combined with our own private lives, as kids and other things. So there was something getting clearer. And at the end of that course, I said to the teacher, well, it would be very interesting to see if this also could work in organizations. And so 10 years ago, my now co-director of the Center for Mindfulness in Amsterdam, Rob Brandsma, and I started talking about the application of mindfulness in organization, and we developed a whole course and a lot of other things there. And I won't bother you with the whole story, but what is interesting is that mindfulness is nowadays almost all over the place, also in the organizational world. Let me take you on this short talk. I have a few themes about mindfulness, agile organizations, talking about what are the risks of effectiveness in agile teams. Why is mindfulness anyway interesting for organizations? Why would you do it? How does it work? And if it works, what can you do about it? So let me start with this question to you. Take in your mind for a second, think back over the last few days. What was the feeling on most of the last few days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Were you really performing engaged, with fun, naturally working, getting energy of your work, enthusiasm, and felt well? Or was the work a bit more on the right side, the feeling of I have to do this and it must be finished, and my boss really wants this to happen before the end of the day? Let me show a few hands. Who was more on the left side? And who was more on the right side? Okay, well, you're a good crowd. You know how to deal with your work very well. So, what are the risks that I took from the literature on the functioning of agile teams? And you see a lot of risks on overload and burnout. People taking excessive overtime. A lot of mistakes, wrong designs, poor choices, rising temperatures in the team, people not communicating very well with each other, stress and conflict. If you look back at the short video at the beginning from Luke and Frank, this type of discussions, you all have seen them probably in your teams. A lack of fun, the feeling that the company is not investing in real quality of the work, of systems, of management. A lot of negotiation. People taking work with them to their homes, not taking enough holiday time, working on and on. So I can go on, this list might be quite a lot longer, but this is the usual experience of a lot of organizations. It's not for nothing that stress and burnout are really very high in health problems in the Netherlands, but worldwide. So there's really something going on. And why is that? There are many causes for it, but there are few that, in my view, stand out. There's a high demand for a high performance level. Everything must be very well done and in a very quick pace. There's a need from all societal and organizational developments that innovation is on the agenda from moment to moment. We cannot wait. There are so many problems in the world that we really need to innovate quite quickly. And there is this demand of 24/7 availability. You cannot shut down your smartphone. You cannot be not available for your colleagues. It's cross domains, but it's also cross the world. You work with colleagues in other countries, etc. So it is an intensity that is really demanding people quite a bit. So what happens? Agile work, Scrum, is a very interesting and very effective way of dealing with problems. So you get faster, better results, and often within budget. So it's a very effective tool. But given all the risks I showed, there is a possible trade-off. And that trade-off is that the process itself, if it's not well organized and not well managed, leads to a lot of process insecurity. How do we do it? If people are not trained well, young people, they don't know. I have a lot of young software engineers in my mindfulness courses that really are all over the place. And they cannot dissolve them from their daily work, and they get stressed out and burn out when they're 25. So the expectation of self-management, which is a lot of speaking, we all expect people to self-manage in hospitals, in software development, etc. One of the elements that self-management brings is that it enhances insecurity, because you have to take decisions on your own, and there's nobody you can rely upon. So one of the advantages of old-fashioned management was that there was a kind of old guy, mostly, that helped you to see through things, that could give you a kind of secure environment in which to develop and to work. The expectation of self-management and the organizational processes that get away a lot of management bring people in a situation that they have to deal with a lot more psychological insecurity themselves. And I won't say we have to go back to the old forms of management, but we have to find new ways to adapt to those processes. So why mindfulness? One thing, it's all over the place, I said, from the World Economic Forum to many organizations in the world. The research body of mindfulness is growing incredibly over the last, well, say from 2000 to now, and this graph is from 2013, but the graph is even higher by 2016. And it's broadened. Originally it was psychology, cognitive psychology. It has broadened into organizational psychology, into management studies, into neuroscience. So a lot more is being done there. We have done, together with the University of Maastricht, our own research into the effectiveness of mindfulness in organizational teams. So we had a control group and an intervention group. And I'm not sure this works on the... No. What you can see is on the left side is the psychological scale of mindfulness. That's a well-established psychological scale. And you see the graph that goes up is the effect of the training program with people that did the training program. The one that goes a little bit down is the training the effect of the control group. So the mindfulness went up in that group. Mindfulness being able to steer your attention and to focus much more precisely on what you want to do. And the perceived stress in that group went really down. And those are interesting results. One other result that is not on this sheet is that there's a clear shift within people from an extrinsic motivation, so your boss telling you that you have to do things, to an intrinsic motivation. I like to do this. And intrinsic motivation is one of the main elements of psychological well-being and health. There's been a lot of research in areas of performance, the way people relate to each other and the way well-being is affected by it. A few examples. Middle managers that have done a mindfulness course get higher grades from their supervisors, from their higher managers. What also is clear is that mindfulness strengthens the social aspects of leadership. So it helps leaders that have done a mindfulness course get a higher employee satisfaction in their teams. It leads to better quality of communication, listening, perspective taken, better understanding of emotions in teams. Often we work in teams saying that it's all about content, it's all about the task. But there's also a human side in it that needs to be taken care of. And what you also see in the area of well-being, a lot less incidents of burnout, stress, and negative moods, and a far higher work engagement, which is also a crucial factor in performance. So there seems to be a kind of a business case, and although we cannot yet put numbers to it, there is a kind of business case for mindfulness in the workplace. I would like to show you a bit, because there's real interesting research being done in the area of neuroscience and mindfulness, to show that it's really visible, an effect of how mindfulness works on the regulation of emotions. And the regulation of emotions is one of the elements that is really crucial in being able to cooperate with other people in a team. And of course, if we work in teams that have to deal with a lot of complexity, or we have leaders that need to be adaptive to many different situations, one of the biggest elements is that you need to be understanding the emotional aspects of that. Not only the task itself, but also the way you deal with it. So on the left side picture, you see the lateral prefrontal cortex, which is the area where we process our experiences. So where we think what they mean and how they work. And in the picture on the right, you see the most right one, gray area, is the posterior cingulate cortex, which is the area where you receive the signals from your senses. Keep that in mind. How does mindfulness affect pain in the brain? And there was a very interesting research study by colleagues in Harvard. They did it with fMRI scans and pain inducement, so they injected pain in people's arms. And they had a group of meditators and a group of non-meditators. So what you see here is that the reception of those signals went up. So people, the meditators, were more sensitive to the pain signals. Interesting. More processing there. So it's an activity measure, what you're seeing there. What also is interesting is that the activity measure in the frontal cortex was decreasing. So there was less activity thinking about giving meaning to that pain. The conclusion by the researchers then was that your senses with meditation or mindfulness meditation work better. So you're more sensitive in many ways. But it helps better to regulate your prefrontal cortex is activated in a way that makes it easier to give sense and to connect to those things. And being less affected directly by those pain senses. So this is some evidence, and it's only the beginning, that mindfulness training might be very interesting for people in organizations because the regulation of emotions gets better. There's one area that's very interesting. That's why I'm standing here. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been here. Christoph and Peter, one of the students of the center, and the Center of Mindfulness have done an incredibly interesting small study. We've been investigating what a short mindfulness exercise did in the results in the effectiveness of agile teams. And what we tried to measure was their involvement in decision making, how involved were people, their overall effectiveness, how their listening skills were, the level of disagreement in the team during a meeting that was intervened in, the tension level, and the interaction and emotional responses. So a few measures to do so, and I will not go into the full area of that research, but only give you a short overview. So we did 3 different groups. And a few of our teachers of the center went to those organizations and those groups and did a short mindfulness exercise there at the beginning of the stand-up meeting. And we had about, I think, 40 or 50 measurements, isn't it, Christoph?
I think we had in the total we had 100 responses.
100 responses.
So we had 3 teams in each company, and we had 3 companies. So we had 9 teams in total.
9 teams. Yeah, that's right.
It was a controlled trial, just like
so it was a really controlled trial. We did in one group we did a short mindfulness exercise, and I will let you experience that exercise in a short moment. In the other teams we did a musical intervention, so kind of relaxation music, and in the third series of group we did nothing. So what turned out, well, of course, in the group where we did nothing, there was no effect visible. Would be surprised if it would have been, isn't it? In the music group, there was a small effect, but not very significantly. But the mindfulness intervention proved to be significant, and that's interesting. So what did we do in those groups? That people in the group were all asked after the meeting, after the stand-up meeting, to fill in a form about the effect and how the meeting had gone. And they were asked questions about that. So what did you do? Are you in for an experiment? Right now, here in public? Okay, great. Go sit down right up on your chair. Okay, you can open your eyes again and relax. This is the short mindfulness intervention that we did in those groups. And what did people feel here? 1 or 2? You probably felt a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of stepping out of the stream of words that I'm throwing out over you. And this is one of the elements where mindfulness works. It helps you to disconnect a little bit from being too much involved and getting a bit more overview of what's happening. And doing that at the beginning of a meeting helps people first of all, to be really there at the meeting, because often people are still thinking about other things they were doing just before or things that they have to do afterwards, and their mind is all over the place. So it really helps to focus. But it also relaxes, and that means that people get a bit more open to really listening to each other. So there are a few elements that make this work, as we think. Yeah, I will quickly go through it. So this is what we did. This is something about the background mind-body system. It's about our stress signal, and what you do through this mindful awareness is that you train your early warning system for signals and are able to stop and give a more conscious response to the situation. So mindfulness helps you stopping from running on and on and on in an emotional mode, sitting back and saying, okay, what's happening here and what is the best response? And that's really crucial for helping people out in teamwork. We have designed at the Center of Mindfulness and in my book on mindful leadership, a kind of intervention model. How can you go in an organization, and not only on the individual level, from a kind of stress culture where everything is very paced up to a kind of what we call green zone, where cooperating is far more effective than in the stress culture. And it's effective both in terms of performance, there is research for that, and in terms of the way people cooperate and feeling well and happy with it. So they start to become more engaged. And there are four or five elements that are important there. Getting a focus in the team, which is of course also in agile teams very important. Seeing that the resilience of the people in the team and the team itself. So are we working at the right pace or not too hard? Do we relax in time? Is something that is a collective responsibility. Are we able to see what is happening on the emotional level in the team and manage that? How do we cooperate? Is it by debating and discussing or by listening and asking questions? And how do we deal with performance? Is performance your task, and if you don't do it, cutthroat? Or is it something of a shared responsibility? Leadership, and my definition is probably a little bit different, but not that much from the one Sandra gave at the early, starts by consciously experiencing what is happening inside yourself, but also in the outside world. Bringing those experiences together, being attentive to it, and then directing the attention, because mindful leadership, in my view, is about directing the attention to what needs to be done. So leaders are really busy with attention and directing that. The success of an intervention and the success of leadership is defined by the inner condition of a leader. A bashing, old-fashioned style leader that goes over the people is not about the one that works, and he doesn't know he's doing it. That's the big problem. So leadership is also asking from yourself that you be aware of what you are doing while you are doing it. Well, there are a few areas that I won't go into because of time, but this is where it all leads to the real good teamwork. And you can do that by building practices, either through daily exercises, by getting team breaks, by journaling and reflecting more than only the stand-up meetings, but all the reflective meetings. What you need, and there's a crucial role, that's the role of the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master should be somebody who's really the one that leading with a mindful perspective. And that could be of great help in team. But you also have team practices. Really effectively checking in. Taking time for resilience check and not only jumping to the next task and the overview of what needs to be done. Continuous training, of course, and a culture of learning. And there are some wonderfully interesting, but one example of the effectiveness. Well-trained mindful teams in hospitals show a far lesser number of mistakes in giving medication to patients in hospitals. So in this area also it could lead to far better cooperation and better performance in agile teams. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a very interesting talk to listen to. I was curious, in the research you did for your book as well as in your experience, how does, for instance, religion and sort of the mindfulness encouraged by religion have a correlation with this? Do you think that, for instance, people who pray would also be a group that would fall within this, that they are also taking a break during the period of work to do this? Has there been any research into that as well?
Nice question, thank you. There has been research into that contemplative forms of prayer also have more or less the same effect as mindfulness training, because it works on the more or less the same mechanism. So the answer there is yes. What of course happened is that mindfulness in its modern Western way as we use it has been taken out all of the original contemplative traditions and being reformulated in terms of modern cognitive psychology, secular, not religion-based anymore. So by that, it's become a tool that we can use in many areas.